Today we are looking at conversions. And when we say conversions in this instance, what we're talking about is changing fractions, decimals, and percents into one another. We're going to look at each scenario and take a look with some examples on how to do those conversions. One thing to remember is the more that you know already, or the ones that you have memorized, the easier this is. In fact, if you can memorize some of the basic ones, then that's going to lead to doing a lot less work. It will just make for an easier time on homework, quizzes, and tests. So we really recommend that you study your conversion charts, going over those, know all your fourths, your fifths, your eighths, your tenths, your thirds, your sixths. Have those in your memory bank, and therefore you're not going to have to do that work over, and you're only going to have to work out a few problems instead of all of them. So let's go ahead and start with this first one. Here we're looking at changing decimals and fractions. We're going to start by doing a decimal to a fraction, and then we'll go to a fraction to a decimal. So to change a decimal to a fraction, the notes, I guess you could say, is say it, write it, simplify it. What we mean by that is to say it the correct way. For example, looking at this first one, not 0.55. That's not the right way to say a decimal, but we're going to say 55 hundredths because it ends in the hundredth spot. So when we say 55 hundredths, it actually sounds like a fraction. So let's write it that way. 55 hundredths. 55 over 100. You've already changed it into a fraction. So at this point, all we have left to do is to simplify if we can. So let's take a look here. We can actually simplify 55 over 100. We think what number can go into each of those? Well, of course, 5 can. So we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 5. 55 divided by 5 is 11, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. We can't simplify any more, so there's our fraction. Let's try this next one. This again is not 12.8, but it's 12 and 8 tenths because it ends in the tenth spot. So let's write it that way as a fraction. 12 and 8 tenths, or 8 over 10. Notice we have a mixed number. We should have known we're going to have a mixed number because if you notice that decimal is greater than 1. We have a whole number in it. Our last step is to simplify. 12 just goes right along with it. We're going to simplify the 8 and the 10, thinking what number can go into each of those. Well, 2 can go into each of those. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. We can't simplify anymore, so we're left with 12 and 4/5. The next thing we're going to look at is changing a fraction to a decimal. Our notes in this instance is divide. That's what we're looking at. The thing to remember is that the top dog gets the house. The numerator goes inside. The denominator goes outside. That's probably the biggest mistake that we see as teachers. So top dog gets the house. The top number goes in. Notice we didn't say big dog. It's not the biggest number that goes in. It's always the numerator. Well, 8 cannot go into 7, so we need to add a decimal point, go ahead and bring it up, and add a 0. 8 can go into 70 8 times, which is 64. Let's subtract. We get 6, add a 0, bring it down. 8 can go into 60 7 times, which is 56. Subtract, we get 4, add a 0, bring it down, and 8 can go into 40 exactly 5 times. So we have now changed this fraction into the decimal of 875 thousandths. Next, we're going to look at changing decimals and percents into one another. These are probably some of the easier kinds to solve because you're not actually going to have to do anything with the numbers. All we're going to be doing here is moving the decimal point. To go from a decimal to a percent, we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. So in this first example, I'm going to take the decimal and I'm going to move it 2 places, now making this 95%. In this next one, again, move it 2 places to the right, and we now have 174%. You can have a percent that is over 100. Think about if you ever have made a grade higher than 100 on a test. Perhaps there was extra credit. So percents can be out of something more than 100, but we always look at them out of 100. Next, we're going to move our percents to decimals. Here we're going to move our decimal 2 places to the left this time. It's the exact opposite. So in this first example, I don't see a decimal. Remember, when you're not seeing a decimal, it's because it's hiding, and you always hide behind a number. So it's right behind the 2. It's at the end of the number. I'm going to move it 2 places to the left, drop that percent sign, so 12% turns into 12 hundredths. On this next example, I do have a decimal, so I don't have to make my own. I'm still going to move it 2 places to the left. Anytime you have a blank, we always fill it in with a 0. So here we end up with 47 thousandths. The last thing we're going to look at is changing fractions and percents into one another. Let's start by doing fractions and percents, and then we'll move over to percents to fractions. You'll notice that there's 2 different types of instructions, Part A and Part B. Part A says to get your denominator to be a 100. That's probably the easiest way to change it to a fraction to a percent, because remember that percent means out of 100. But the problem with this, and some of you might be thinking that, is, well, what if I cannot make my denominator into 100? Looking at our 2 examples, on the second example, you can't make 12 into 100 evenly. So that's where you always need to have a backup plan. The backup plan here would be Part B. And that would be to divide to make this into a decimal, and then you would move your decimal point over 2 places to the right and turn it into a percent. Part A is a little easier, so I always look to see if I can make my denominator into 100 first. For example, on this first example, I can change 5 to be a 100 by multiplying it by 20. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 20, and I end up with 60. Remember, percent means out of 100. So once your denominator is 100, your numerator is your answer. So this is 60%. For this next one, I cannot change 12 to be a 100. So here's where I'm going to have to do Part B. I'm going to have to go ahead and divide, turn it into a decimal, and then turn it into a percent by moving the decimal point over. So top dog gets the house. So 12 goes outside, 7 goes inside. Let's go ahead and add a decimal point and a 0. 12 can go into 70 5 times, which is 60. I'm going to try to write real small so I can try to get this on here, which is 10. Add a 0 and bring it down. 12 can go into 100 8 times, which is 96. Subtract and we get 4, add a 0, and bring it down. 12 can go into 40 3 times, and I'm going to actually have to move this up a little bit, which is 36. Subtract and I get 4, add a 0, bring it down. At this point, we can see that that 3 is going to be repeating. So now that I have it as a decimal, I'm going to move my decimal point over 2 places, 1, 2, and I now have my percent. 58 point repeating 3%. So that is the longer way, but that way always works. I would still try to find a way to get your denominator to be a 100. Perhaps simplifying first would help, if you can. And if not, you can always go back to, not the old school, but the sturdy way that will always work every single time. The next and the last thing we're going to look at is changing a percent to a fraction. Here, all we need to do is to put this over 100 and simplify. So for this first one, I'm going to put 65 over 100, and I'm going to try to simplify. Looking at both of these, 5 can go into each of them. If I divide 65 by 5, I get 13, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. I can't simplify any more, so that's my final answer. On here, second example, I'm going to put 77 over 100. It is always over 100. Percent means out of 100. And I'm going to try to simplify. In this instance, nothing goes into 77 and 100, so I am done. And my fraction is 77 over 100. I hope this was all helpful. I also hope that you will go back and look at your conversion chart and try to memorize as many of these as possible. You'll find that it is much, much easier if you already know your fifths, your eighths, your fourths, your sixths, your thirds, and so on. So I highly recommend you do that. But whenever you get ones that you're not sure how to do, this is the best way to go through and do all your conversions.